Hey friends, and welcome to the side of the room that you don't normally get to see in my YouTube videos, because today it is a bit of a quick and dirty video. I'm recording this on the webcam just on my PC here, so apologies if the video quality is not up to its usual standard. But I did want to get out an early video this week before the main video that I'm working on that will hopefully be out before the weekend, to have a little celebration for a couple of landmarks that the channel has reached in the last 6 months actually. Now recently I went past 60,000 subscribers on this channel, and I thought that deserves a bit of a celebration. Now obviously 50,000 that we hit in October last year would have felt like a more logical celebration, a bit more of a landmark, but as many of you will know if you follow me on my social media or listen to my podcast, I actually lost my father in October of last year. Weirdly enough, on the same day that the channel hit 50,000 subscribers actually, so obviously we missed that celebration of the channel. But I think now, you know, 6 months later, we just hit 60,000 recently. It would be a good time to kind of mark that actually, and for me to say a big thank you to you, because not only is it just amazing, but also very humbling that, you know, 60,000 people want to listen to some nerd talking about old computers on the internet. So a massive thank you for your support of my channel, whether you're a new viewer or you've been watching me for like, what, 12 or so years I've been doing YouTube now. But in today's video, I thought we'd do something a little bit different and I would turn the floor over to you. So today I'm going to be answering your questions. And just before we jump into that, I just wanted to take a quick moment to give a big thank you to a regular sponsor of this channel, my wonderful friends at PCBWay. Now, if you're working on a project at the moment and you need a board making for it, give them a try. They offer a full-feature custom PCB prototype service with more than a decade in the field. They give you low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and of course, they're big supporters of the retro community as well. So a big thank you to PCBWay for supporting my channel. Okay then, and while I answer your questions, I thought to make this video a little bit more visually interesting than looking at the messy office behind me and me probably looking a bit sweaty as it is the hottest night of the year so far here in the UK. I thought I'd play a few of my all-time favourite Amiga demos while we talk, so I'm going to be playing those in the background while I answer your questions. And the first one comes from Franco, so big thank you Franco for your question. He said, what's the micro you've got most sentiments for and why? So the microcomputer that I'm most sentimental for, well, I've mentioned it on this channel before that the Acorn BBC Micro was really the machine that first got me into computers, as when I was infant school, so when I was about like what, 7 or 8 years old, we actually had a couple of BBC Micros at my school, 2 BBC Bs and 2 BBC Masters, and I fell in love with those machines. And I do remember actually I was the computer monitor at school, and I don't mean a visual display unit. I mean, I actually had the job, a bit like child labour, I guess you could call it, of getting in early, about half an hour early every morning. Me and my friend Gary used to do it, and we'd take the BBC computers out of this massive iron safe that the school used to lock them up in overnight, and I'd have the job of setting them up on the trolleys, you know, with the cub monitors and the 5¼ inch floppy drives, and then I would wheel the BBC Micros into whichever classroom was going to be using it that day. So yeah, that was kind of my my little job at school. As you can imagine, all the other kids must have thought I was so cool doing that every morning. But yeah, the BBC Micro, very sentimental for me as being, you know, the machine that really started my whole journey. But also the Commodore Plus/4 as well, as that was the first ever computer I got at home, and actually still have the same Plus/4 set up next to me working, you know, great working order all these years later. So yeah, those two machines definitely have a special place in my heart. So thank you for that question, Franco. The next one comes from Neon Ewick, and he goes, why do you think all the mini consoles like the Sega Mega Drive, the SNES, the Neo Geo are being built, yet still there is no mini Amiga? A CD32 mini would be ideal. Well, actually, I don't know if you saw on the Facebook page of the company that made the 64, you know, the Commodore 64 Mini, and that Maxi model that they made as well. They put a little teaser up there, I think back in January, what looked like teasing a Amiga 500 Mini by the looks of it. Now, I have been in contact with the guys. I know at the moment they're not at a stage where they can really reveal any more details about the project or kind of where it's at right now, but hopefully that is going to be something that will materialize before the end of this year. I think the biggest issue has been that unlike, releasing a Mega Drive Mini, Sega is still around, or, Sony want to release a PlayStation Mini, they own all the rights to it, they can do it really simply. But with the Amiga, the fact that it's been through so many different companies and so many different parts of it are owned by different companies all around the world, and there's still all these court cases that have been going on for 25 years, and really the rights to the Amiga are much more complicated than something like the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo. So I think that's really been the thing that's held it up. I do agree though, hopefully we'll get a mini Amiga at some point. I do remember thinking actually when, I don't know if you remember that original Commodore 64 in a joystick design. I think Jerry Ellsworth made that back in around 2005. I remember thinking then how amazing it would be, kind of like an Amiga on a joystick, like a Competition Pro or something with a little Amiga emulator inside that you could plug into your TV and would have Sensible Soccer and Chaos Engine, maybe the top 25 Amiga games. I think that would have sold really well. So hopefully that will be something that eventually does make it to market, because I agree there's definitely a gap there for it. And the next question comes from Lucas. He goes, "Hey Dan, thank you for the great work on your channel. Can you tell me which equipment you use to put together your videos?" Well, I haven't got an extravagant setup at all for making my videos. Actually, most of my vids are actually filmed on my iPhone, a standard iPhone 12, which I actually found gave me better video quality than my Sony camcorder that I used for several years. So I haven't got like a DSLR or anything like that. Obviously, as the channel grows and I can earn more revenue from it, that would be something I'd like to invest in, like a proper nice quality DSLR at some point in the future. But for now, the iPhone does a job, apart from when I get phone calls in the middle of recording videos and it vibrates, or I forget to put it in airplane mode, but for the most part it works really well. In terms of audio, I use a Heil PR30 mainly for doing my videos now. I did try a few different microphones over the last year. I had a Shure SM7B I tried for a bit, an Electro Voice RE20 I also tried too. I used to use like a cheapo Audio Technica AT2020 condenser USB microphone that served me well for many years, but I want to upgrade the audio quality of the channel, and really this is a mic that I've had most success with. Really a big fan of the way this one sounds, and a lot of people comment going, "You're talking into your microphone wrong." This is actually, even though it looks like a side address microphone, it is an end address dynamic mic, a Heil PR30. So yeah, big fan of this. And actually, if you look over my shoulder, if I go that way, I've got another one that looks similar. It's another Heil microphone, a PR40 that I use for my podcast that I record over there in this room, and I've got a Heil PR35 that I use for live sets and DJing and events and stuff. So if you want a really good quality dynamic microphone, definitely a big fan of the Heil range. In terms of editing, I use a Mac Mini, one of the M1 models with Final Cut. I've been using that now since the back end of last year. Big fan of it, love the M1 architecture, and that machine absolutely flies. And in terms of audio, I record it into Adobe Audition, and that's really the setup, really. Nothing high end, it's all just basic gear, but does the job for now, I think. So thank you for the question, Lucas. The next couple of questions are kind of about the podcast. I'm going to combine these two, from CMOS and MindMob. CMOS says, "You've probably told this before, but what's the story of how you all started the Retro Hour and your first few shows and your thoughts on them?" And MindMob says, "What got you starting a podcast?" So really, like many of the best ideas, the Retro Hour podcast came out of a drunken night out. Most of the best ideas start in the pub. It was actually at the Amiga's 30th anniversary show out in Amsterdam back in 2015. Now, I'd done podcasting before. I think my last podcast I did was one called Logic Lounge. That was probably around the same time that I started this channel back in around 2008, 2009. Did it with a fella from America called Crichton. And yeah, it was a great little show, actually. I really enjoyed doing it. He was really the brains behind it, kind of like a rip-off of This Week in Tech. Unfortunately, didn't get many listeners, and it didn't really take off back then. But it wasn't quite an awkward time for podcasting, the late 2000s. Even though smartphones had arrived, we had the iPhone was out by then, and the earliest Android phones. But really, the way that most people had to listen to podcasts back then was to download it off iTunes and sync it to an iPod or a Zune or something like that. And it was a bit more involved than just streaming it like today. So it kind of felt like the podcasting was fading away a bit around the end of the 2000s. But then around 2015, when, you know, we had good smartphone apps for podcasting, it kind of started to ascend again. So we kind of rode that wave with the Retro Hour. And really the idea was that, you know, Ravi and I, who I do the show with, were in Amsterdam after the show, had a few drinks, and I said to him, you know, as we're walking back to the hotel, I think we should try doing a podcast. You know, they're getting quite popular again now. And we met Alistair Brimble at the Amiga show, who was actually the first guest on our podcast. And the original idea was just to do maybe 2 or 3 episodes and kind of see how it went. And I remember on that first episode, within a week, we had 1,000 listeners, which, you know, blew us away at the time. Obviously, we've got a hell of a lot more now. But yeah, really, it just kind of went from there, really. And Joe, the other host on the podcast, I've been good friends with Joe for, you know, well over a decade now. And, you know, I think the podcast is kind of well balanced as well, because Ravi's much more of a computer guy. You know, he's a PC gamer, background with Amigas, you know, stuff like Super Nintendo and that he doesn't really know anything about. With me, I kind of straddled both camps, really. But again, you know, heavy background in microcomputers and the Amiga in particular. Whereas Joe is an out-and-out console guy. So he really brings that, you know, Sega, Nintendo, PlayStation knowledge to the show. So I think we complement each other really well. So, and it's obviously been a winning formula, being that we're almost at 300 episodes now. So, yeah, that's how the podcast got started. Thank you for those questions. Fraser Sutherland is next. He goes, what's your thought on EverDrive cartridges, and do you prefer the Super Nintendo or the Mega Drive? Now that is a big question at the end there. In terms of EverDrives, yeah, I've been a massive fan of, you know, all forms of flash carts, really. I did actually cover a few of them on this channel, probably around 10 years ago now. Did the N64 EverDrive, the NES one, Super Nintendo one, the Mega Drive one as well, I've covered on here before. I've recently got my hands on the Atari Jaguar flash cart, and I'm a massive fan of them. It's just, you know, the convenience of having just one cartridge in your machine. I haven't got to go through the cupboard and find out games that are probably buried at the back there somewhere. And also, I mean, I'm not a big software collector, I'm a hardware collector, but in terms of games, I mean, apart from the Atari Jaguar, I haven't got a massive game library. So the fact that having an EverDrive lets me play games that are not in my collection physically is really good. And I think they're great as well for playing games that maybe weren't available in your region. And a lot of people are fans of, you know, playing games that only came out in Japan, for example, on EverDrives. So yeah, definitely a big fan of them. In terms of what do I prefer, the Super Nintendo or the Mega Drive? Now, this is something I changed my mind on quite a lot. I've got to say, I do think the Super Nintendo was the more superior of the two machines. It had better hardware. Obviously came out a few years later than the Mega Drive, but as a kid, you know, I always much preferred the Mega Drive. I thought it was a cooler system, and much more of my friends actually owned Mega Drives back in the day than the Super Nintendo. And I probably do prefer the game library on the Mega Drive, being that I'm more into, you know, action arcade games and races and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a close call, but I think the Mega Drive would definitely pip it in terms of which one I prefer. And the next question comes from Pedro, who says, where do you think the Amiga would be today if Commodore hadn't made the choices they did and the company would go on until today? So really, if Commodore survived and the Amiga was still being made in 2021, what would it look like? He actually mentions here that he's a big fan of 2D games, and he thinks going 3D on the Amiga would have ruined the feel. I do know that Commodore were actually planning on going 3D. If you look up the Ombre chipset that Dave Haney was working on, the specs of that are actually quite similar to the PlayStation 1. So it was going to have texture mapped, you know, 3D graphics. That's what the Amiga was going to develop into. And I remember there was talk about it running Windows NT as an operating system, you know, rather than Amiga OS in a few of the magazines of the day. So I think it would have been, you know, like most machines ended up converging into commodity hardware. It would have probably gone down that route in the end. Interestingly, the Mac has kind of gone the other way recently, with Apple kind of making their own silicon, even though it's ARM-based. I do wonder if the Amiga would have ended up going in the direction of Apple, really. So really, you know, it would have been a customized PC with, you know, Commodore branding on and their own proprietary operating system running on there. But I think that would have been the direction that it probably went in, and it felt like the direction that Commodore were going in. You know, the later Amigas they were working on with the AAA chipset and the Ombre, they had stuff like, you know, PCI slots in there instead of Zorro, and they were working towards that kind of more standardized hardware because it was becoming a lot cheaper at that time. So probably that would have been the direction that it went in, quite similar to the Mac, I think. And the next few questions, again, quite similar, so I'll combine these into one big answer. Alexandra Filian, MindMob, and DJ Eprom, first name, last name, has been in touch as well. So the question is from Alexandra. He goes, work, podcasting, YouTube. How do you do it all, and what keeps you going? Well, generally at this time of day, being that it is 1:45 in the morning. I don't know if you can see that on my watch there. Yeah, I'm recording this video quite late in the day. Generally the thing that keeps me going this time of day would be coffee. But yeah, I do quite a lot of other jobs as well. First name, last name says, how long do your videos take to make? How do you find the time? And MindMob says, what jobs do you do? And do you still do DJ mixes? So yeah, I mean, outside of YouTube, I do have at least 2 or 3 day jobs probably. I work for a publishing company, a European publishing company. I do a radio show, 7 days a week, a music radio show that I've done for over a decade here in the East Midlands of England. I do social media management. I do content creation online for the same company as well. I do freelance social media work. I work with a team from FriendOS, a media manager for them. So, I do videos and content for them too. I've also started doing stuff like freelance audio and podcast editing and production recently as well as taking on several other freelance jobs. In terms of how I find the time, generally, I mean, some weeks I do work quite a lot of hours. It's not uncommon that I may do an 80-hour working week. But again, I mean, the old adage is that if you find a job that you enjoy, you will never work another day in your life. I think that's the old saying, isn't it? I do love everything that I do. But I must admit, there was a time when, I don't know if you're a long-term viewer of this channel, you might remember that in late 2018, I actually took a 5-month break from YouTube just because I was getting a lot of freelance work and really I couldn't find the time to make videos. And I'll be honest, I actually put a lot more effort into my videos these days, and stuff like my my N64 video that I did about a year or so ago, and my operating system lists. Often those videos from start to finish can be about a 50-hour production. So 50 hours, and I'll try and do those in like 2 weeks. So it's kind of a full-time job really, isn't it? But really the way I found time to do it is really when it got to that stage when I was about to quit YouTube actually in late 2018, I made the choice that I enjoyed doing the channel and I wanted to continue it, but really, the risk of sounding a bit coarse, it had to pay its way, or really had to pay for my time. So I actually turned down freelance jobs in order to focus on the channel. But the only way that I could do that was obviously by earning some money off the channel. So I did actually set up a Patreon in early 2019 that I know Patreon works really well for some channels. Unfortunately, it didn't for me. I think in about a year, I only had about 5 people backing me on Patreon, which, I've got to say a massive thank you to those 5 people that did. Your support is incredible. But after Patreon took its cut, I think I was earning around $12 a month, which obviously wasn't enough to warrant spending 50 hours on a video and turning down freelance work. So in the end, I went down the sponsorship route. So you may notice that every video I do now is sponsored, which is incredible. And it, means that I can not only afford the time to do videos, but also it means, I'm not becoming a millionaire off sponsorship, but it means that I can take my very patient wife out for a meal on a Friday night after, being cooped up in studios and my home office making videos and podcasts all week. So yeah, the sponsorship has really helped out this channel. And I'll be honest, I've had a bit of a backlash. There have been some people who've, called me a sellout and a shill, and, some actually quite nasty comments, actually. People saying, get a real job and all that kind of thing, which, you're always going to get on YouTube. Obviously people don't look into what you do. But in the main, most people accept that, the sponsors I get. I mean, I've got my regular ones. PCBWay are incredible. They've been huge supporter of my channel. Very big on the retro scene as well, and wonderful people. Skillshare as well, another great service who've, worked with me for a couple of years now. And then I get other sponsors that have come in and just, booked videos here and there. I always try and do the background checks on them as well. I may not always get it right. I remember I did get a bit of backlash from my Shadow Raid Legends sponsorship slot. I tried it out. It looked like a pretty decent mobile game. I didn't see anything wrong with it, but I got a bit of a backlash over that. But really the fact is, without sponsorship, this channel wouldn't be going today. And I always try and do the chapter marks as well, so people can kind of, skip through the parts of the video that they want. But that's really how I find the time. It's thanks to actually having sponsors who allow me to make videos for you guys. So definitely do support them. They're what keep this channel going. In terms of my DJ mixes, I used to be a full-time club DJ for many years. I still do streams and, you know, bars and clubs when I can now. If you check out Soulful House DJs on Mixcloud, I stream there every other Sunday, really. And if you check out my Mixcloud page, mixcloud.com/danwood, I've got a load of my DJ mixes on there if you like, you know, soulful house music and UK garage. It's generally the vibe that I do, and a bit of kind of, you know, rare disco and funk and that kind of thing. And the next question says, hey Dan, in my school days around 1994, I had computer lessons using an Amstrad with a built-in 3-inch disk drive. Very nice. I do like 3-inch discs. He goes, I'd love to see what these machines can do besides basic. Love your content and keep it going. Well, thank you for that. I've actually recently got my hands on an Amstrad 6128. By a guy who actually donated it to the channel called James, who very generously donated that machine complete with a printer and a monitor and a big stack of software. Unfortunately, the keyboard's not working on it at the moment, which is a project that I've set in my mind that I want to get sorted this summer. So hopefully there will be some Amstrad content on the channel. And yeah, you know, the stuff they've been doing in the Amstrad scene recently, you know, like the Batman group, you know, getting games like Pinball Fantasies running on there. I think people are really pushing that platform and making it do things that nobody realised that it could actually do back in the day. So I'm looking forward to kind of delving in deep into the Amstrad and hopefully getting a few videos made on that. The next one comes from Annika Rice. Great to have you watching, Annika. Not sure if it's the same one. 2 questions. What's your favourite game, and which version of the Amiga Workbench and Kickstart do you prefer? Well, favourite game, yeah, it's almost an impossible question to answer. That kind of changes by the day. One that instantly springs to mind would be the Secret of Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge. I always loved point-and-click adventure games as a kid, and that was just an epic game. You know, I love the Monkey Island games anyway, but I think number 2 was really the peak of the franchise. Even though I actually played that game on my Amiga 500 Plus back in the day, had an external floppy disk drive, but still it was on 11 floppies, having to wait for everything to load and the amount of disk swapping you had to do, but it was worth it because it was such a wonderful game. And even now I generally replay that game at least once a year. Admittedly, probably more likely to play it on the Xbox with the special edition these days, but you know, still love the story on that game. And I really hope that Ron Gilbert actually gets the rights to Monkey Island back from Disney, and maybe gets to make, you know, the long-awaited Monkey Island 3 that he really wanted to make. Although there has been a few rumours recently that we might be getting a new game, but it's got to have Ron involved, really, hasn't it? Come on. And in terms of which version of Workbench and Kickstart I prefer, on my Amiga 4000, that's kind of my main Amiga, I run version 3.9 on there. I do have the new 3.2 Amiga OS, which I haven't actually installed yet. I got the version for the Amiga 1200, but actually my A1200 is not generally set up because I haven't got space for all my machines. But actually I'm getting my garage converted into another room soon, so hopefully I'm going to have the Amiga 1200 set up in there. But really the reason I haven't gone on 3.2 for my A4000 is that I've had 3.9 running on there for over a decade, and it just runs really well. It's really stable, and you know, I don't want to kind of you know, fix what isn't broke. I'm very hesitant to change anything on it, you know, because it's running so well. But 3.9 to me is kind of, you know, it does everything I want it to do. But you know, back in the day I used to run 2.0. But yeah, most of my machines, it's, you know, a version of maybe 3.1 on my other Amigas. So yeah, bit of an all over the place question there, but yeah, I think version 3.x, you know, if I go back to version 1.3 or something, it just feels really limited, you know, not being able to show all icons, and I miss a lot of the creature comforts in the later versions. Miniside's been on as well. Hey Dan, how do you find all your video ideas? Yeah, well, you know, I do like to kind of stay ahead with my video ideas, and I've actually got a whiteboard next to me with around 20 actual video ideas written on there. So if I ever get a week where I want to make a video and I can't think of anything, I do have quite a big backlog of videos that I want to make. So there's always something there. Whenever I think of something, I generally write it down quickly, because, you know, I always fall foul of doing that. You know, I'd have to write it down, I'll remember it, and then I completely forget what I was going to do. So I have a list of them all and just kind of working my way through them. And then any topical things that kind of come up, you know, like the Pi Storm, when the guys got in touch with me, you know, often I'll do videos based on things that people get in touch with me about. So yeah, a bit varied really, but I've always got something in the bag ready to work on. And the next question comes from Fuzzleby. He goes, hi Dan, what records were you playing when you took a break from gaming and were involved in DJing? Yeah, I've told this story on my podcast before. I actually had my gaming wilderness years in my early 20s. You know, I took a few years where actually, you know, might get some hate for this. I actually got rid of most of my machines, you know. I actually threw out 2 Amiga 1200s and 2 Amiga 500 pluses. Kept my CD32s luckily, but yeah, for a few years I just kind of got completely out of gaming and computing. You know, got into music and alcohol and girls, and you know, briefly cool for a couple of years till I got the bug again. That was never cool. But yeah, I mean, you know, I still do DJing now as well. Like I said before, and it's mainly soulful house music. Always been a big fan of that, and UK garage as well. You know, at its peak back in the early 2000s, I used to play a lot of clubs all around the country and all over Europe, actually playing UK garage. So that's kind of the vibe that I play when I'm DJing. And the next question comes from James, who says, what's your next purchase for the Atari Jaguar? Well, I recently got my hands on, or actually probably about 2 years ago now, the new Pro controllers that I'm a big fan of. Like I mentioned, I got the flash cart for it recently as well. I'd love to get the VR headset, but being that there's only 2 of those in existence, it would be cool if someone actually could make, you know, a replica of the Atari Jaguar VR headset, although I imagine that's probably quite a complex project. In terms of next purchases, you know, I've kind of got my game library is almost complete in terms of like the mainstream games. There are still quite a few homebrew and some of the more obscure games that I don't think I've ever got a chance of getting hold of. But yeah, nothing really in the pipeline that I, you know, can think of that I want to add to my Jaguar collection right now. And like I said, having the flash drive on there, I'm really playing mostly off that these days, and actually, you know, the original games. So thank you for your question. And next is the Mr. Kokor, who says, I'd like your Amiga story. What was your Amiga 1200 history back in the day, and when did you switch to a PC? What turbo card did you have? And did you have a modem with your Amiga? Well, my first Amiga was an Amiga 500 Plus that I got for Christmas 1991. I've talked about that before. I think I did a video actually about 2 years ago unboxing the Cartoon Classics pack, which was my first Amiga pack back in the day. So we got that Christmas 91, and then I think it was Christmas 93 that I got my Amiga 1200 in the Desktop Dynamite pack. So and my Amiga 1200, I stuck with that as my main machine until around 2001. And I did have, you said what turbo card did I have? I didn't actually have an accelerator back then. My Amiga 1200 setup for most of the mid to late 90s was an external CD-ROM drive that I connected via the internal IDE port. I bought one of those IDE splitter boards that you could put inside from iTech, I think it was back in the day. So I had like an IDE cable snaking out the side of my Amiga 1200 and an external CD-ROM drive on my desk with a Molex power cable that I hacked into the floppy drive, power on the Amiga, I remember. So yeah, it looked a bit like Frankenstein's monster, all these cables hanging out of it everywhere. But really that was it. I mean, I also had a VGA monitor that I used on it for a bit as well. I'm using the VGA modes, but I couldn't actually play games on it. So, but I mean, really, I used it for productivity really back then. And what made me switch to a PC? Well, I went away to university, and my mother came in my room and looked at my Amiga 1200, and she said, "You can't take that mess away to university with you. It's time that we got you a proper computer." So she got me a Pentium 3 based Windows 98 PC that actually I ended up taking to university along with my Amiga 1200, and I used it really just as a slave storage device for my Amiga 1200 over a Parnet connection. So it really wasn't until Windows XP came out that I relegated the Amiga 1200 to the attic in my parents, and you know, eventually got thrown out, unfortunately. I haven't got that original Amiga now, but yeah, that's kind of my story with it. You know, it was a great machine, and I did stick with that right until, you know, the early 2000s. I did have a modem on it as well. Yeah, you know, I used to go online on my Amiga 1200 back in the day using iBrowse and AWeb. So I think when we got NTL cable, and it was kind of free, but you had to redial every 2 hours. That's when I spent most of my time online with the Amiga, probably around 99, 2000. Before that, you know, it was a bit too expensive. The next couple of questions come from, they're quite similar, so I'll do these two together. Philip Hanforth and MIDI Error. Nice to hear from you. He goes, I'd like to know, what was the first video game that blew you away? MIDI Error says, what's your standout moment of seeing a new video game and being blown away beyond belief? Well, I think one example that instantly springs to mind would be Bart versus the Space Mutants on the Amiga. Now, bearing in mind when I got my Amiga 500 Plus for Christmas 1991, I come from a Commodore Plus 4, an 8-bit machine with no sprites, very rudimentary graphics on that machine. And then when I got my Amiga 500 Plus and I put in the first disc of Bart versus the Space Mutants, and I was a big fan of The Simpsons at the time, used to watch it on Sky TV, and I saw the animation of Bart Simpson and the UFO coming down. I'd never seen graphics like that on a computer before, so that blew my mind. That's one that instantly stands out to me. And also I remember seeing, I think it was the Microcosm demo on the Commodore CD-TV, running, I think, in Comet, the shop. Obviously that game came out on the CD32 in the end, but there was a demo of it for the CD-TV. And I remember that was the first time I'd seen kind of full motion video running on a computer, and I remember being blown away by that. So that's two examples that, instantly spring to mind. I'm sure there were many more over the years as well. Seeing Ridge Racer on the PlayStation 1, being a fan of that in the arcades and being able to play that at home, that was a pretty big deal as well. And the next question comes from Road to Damascus. He goes, "Hi Dan, my question, do you think retro gaming will be or mean the same to future generations now that everything is mass-produced or going digital? And what is the most prized possession in your collection?" Now, yeah, this has been something that I've been thinking of for a while, and actually we did a documentary all about kind of the future of preserving video games last year for the BBC. So that was a question that we're kind of looking at then, kind of, will there be retro in the future? And I think you're right, the fact that things are going digital now, it does pose a big problem in terms of, when servers get closed down, entire game libraries can be lost. In terms of, do I think it will mean the same to future generations? I do think it will, because people will always be kind of nostalgic for things that they grew up playing, and, kind of games that I played in the 90s. My little nephew Harry, who's 6 years old, he'll probably look at Fortnite in, 25 years in the same way that I look back at, Lemmings or something, a game that means a lot to him when he was growing up. But in terms of the preservation of it as well, I think really the main way that these games are going to be preserved, unless, they're probably inevitably going to be on future game stores, the latest iterations of Steam or whatever that are around in 20, 30 years, will probably have a retro game section on there. But really the thing that preserves most of them, I think, is going to be piracy, really. That's only the real cast iron way to assure that these games are going to be around in the future, is by people who, kind of take it out of the hands of the companies that own it and actually make sure that it's preserved for everybody to play. So that's really, I'm confident that pirates will preserve this stuff in the future. So I do think it's going to be around, but obviously the fact that it's digital means that we won't be able to go into stores and, browse retro sections, and it won't quite be the same, I don't think. It kind of, I think the same with music as well, well, the fact that you've got music now that's not on CDs, it's not on vinyl, it's just a file that lives on your computer. Does that have the same kind of sentiment that, having a physical product will have? So, only time will tell, but I've got a feeling that these games and these experiences will always be special to the people that, spent their formative years playing them. In terms of my most prized possession in my collection, tricky one. I think it's got to be my Amiga 4000, the amount of time and money that I've spent on that machine. And that was always a machine that I dreamed of owning when I was a kid. And, I remember reading the prices of the Amiga 4000 in magazines back in the day and thinking I would never own one in a million years. So, having a childhood dream achieved, that was a very big deal for me. So, yeah, big fan of my A4000. Daniel Doran's been in touch. He goes, "Hi Dan, are you planning on buying an M1 Apple Silicon product?" Well, as I mentioned before, I've actually got one of the M1 Mac Minis that I edit all my videos on. So I actually bought that on launch day. A big fan of it actually as well. Really, really fast machine. So I think it was a really clever move of Apple to go down the ARM route and making their own custom silicon. So I look forward to kind of seeing what is next from Apple and what the new machines in the range are going to bring. David Romero's been on. He goes, "Hi, can you please tell me what are your programming skills on the Amiga?" Well, non-existent really these days. I did dabble a bit with Amos back in the day and tried to learn C and a bit of assembler on the Amiga, and DevPack and Dice C, I think I used to use. I followed tutorials in Amiga magazines, learned a bit of AREX as well for a while, but really anything that I learned on the Amiga in terms of programming, we're going back around 25 years, and Yeah, I need more than a refresher to get back into it. I've completely forgotten it all, but it is something I'd like to pick up again one day, as I always find it, a really interesting platform. But really, it's just finding the time these days, really. SHG goes, can you tell me what is your all-time favorite system and why? Yeah, it's a very tricky one. I think, again, it's got to be the Amiga, hasn't it? The Amiga 4000 is a great machine, but I still think I would probably pick the Amiga 500 just because it was the Amiga that I first got, and just a machine I've got so many fond memories with. So I mentioned the Plus 4 and the BBC before. They were machines that really I'm very sentimental for, machines that set me off on my journey. But the computer that really I've got to thank for everything I'm doing today, really the machine that got me into audio and got me into video and all that stuff, the creative mind of mine was kind of opened up using the Amiga. And the Amiga 500 was a machine that kind of made me see what computers were capable of and, what they could do in the future. So, yeah, the Amiga 500 would probably, definitely be up there in my all-time favourite systems. Could be number one, I think it probably is. And the next question comes from Alan. He goes, my questions are, what happened to Friend OS? Are you still working with them? And I thought the iconography within the OS was great. And well, actually, yeah, Friend has come on a lot in the last 18 months or so. I mean, with a lot of people working remotely, it's been really good for them, actually, getting a lot of new clients and everything. And actually, there's been some really big new iterations of the operating system and a lot of upgrades to it, and you can do a lot more with it now. So I'm still working with them as well, still doing videos for them and helping the guys out, part-time. I'm not a full-time employee, I'm just, a freelancer, a consultant, if you like, with them. But if you want to check out kind of where they're at right now, you can actually sign up for a demo account. If you go onto their website at friendos.com, sign up there, they'll send you a little login, you can use it on their server and kind of check out, it's come a long way in the last couple of years. And the last question here comes from Oma911, who goes, don't get cocky now, I love your YouTube channel, but I don't want to buy your bathing water. So, yeah, retro computer nerd bathing water will not be on sale. I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, what the hell? Yeah, don't look that up. So, yeah, a big thank you for helping me get to 60,000 subscribers. It really means the world to me. And thank you for your questions in this video as well. This is lots of fun to do. Hopefully we can do it on the next benchmark. Here's to 100,000 subs. Hopefully we'll make that in the next year or so. The rate the channel's been growing over the last 18 months, it's definitely on the horizon, I think. But again, I just want to say a really big thank you from deep in my heart for your support of my channel. Thank you for watching the videos, and I'll see you next time.